The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden hue over the bustling John F. Kennedy International Airport. Travelers hurried past, clutching their boarding passes and carry-on bags. Amid the chaos, Dr. Marcus Jameson, a world-renowned neuroscientist and decorated Navy veteran, adjusted the strap of his messenger bag. He was traveling to San Francisco to deliver a groundbreaking keynote speech on the intersection of artificial intelligence and human cognition, a culmination of years of cutting-edge research. Marcus was dressed in a crisp navy blazer, dark jeans, and polished loafers. His composed demeanor and piercing gray eyes often commanded respect, but he was also familiar with the weight of assumptions and biases. Though he had shattered countless stereotypes through his achievements, Marcus knew that prejudice often lingered in the unspoken thoughts of strangers. He had no idea, however, that this flight would turn into a crucible of tension and injustice that would test his patience and resolve. Marcus arrived at Gate 32, where passengers for Flight 675 to San Francisco were gathering. A mix of families, business travelers, and tourists filled the seating area. Marcus found an empty chair and sat down, pulling out his tablet to review his presentation slides. Lost in thought, he barely noticed the sharp, scrutinizing gaze of a woman sitting nearby. She was in her late 40s, impeccably dressed in a tailored cream suit and a diamond necklace. Her demeanor screamed wealth and entitlement. Her eyes darted between Marcus and her phone, her lips pursed in disapproval. When their eyes met briefly, she huffed and turned away, muttering under her breath. Marcus shrugged it off. He had encountered people like her before, people who judged him based on the color of his skin rather than his abilities or character. It wasn't worth engaging. Soon the boarding announcement came over the speakers. Marcus gathered his belongings and joined the line. He noticed the woman, now glaring at him openly, was in the same group. The flight was nearly full, and Marcus found his seat near the back, next to a window. The middle seat remained empty, but the aisle seat was occupied by a young woman with headphones and a book. Marcus gave her a polite nod before settling in. As he stowed his messenger bag under the seat in front of him, he heard a sharp voice from a few rows ahead. "Excuse me," the woman in the cream suit snapped at a flight attendant. "There's no way I'm sitting in coach. I specifically booked first class." The flight attendant, a petite woman with a strained smile, tried to explain that first class was full and offered her a complimentary drink as an apology. The woman's face turned red with indignation. "This is unacceptable. Do you know who I am?" she demanded. Passengers shifted uncomfortably, trying to avoid the scene. Marcus sighed, silently praying she wouldn't be near him. But fate wasn't on his side. Moments later, the woman marched down the aisle, escorted by a second flight attendant. "You can sit here, ma'am," the attendant said, gesturing to the empty middle seat beside Marcus. The woman's eyes widened, as if she had been asked to sit in a dumpster. She glared at Marcus before turning to the attendant. "I'm not sitting next to him," she hissed. The flight attendant froze, her smile faltering. "Ma'am, these are the only available seats." "Find me another seat," the woman insisted, crossing her arms. "I don't feel comfortable sitting here." Marcus' stomach tightened. He clenched his jaw but said nothing. The young woman in the aisle seat glanced at him, her expression apologetic. The flight attendant's voice lowered. "Ma'am, please take your seat. The flight is about to depart." With a loud sigh, the woman finally sat down, her body angled away from Marcus as if proximity might infect her. Marcus tried to focus on his tablet, ignoring her muttered comments about lack of standards and security risks. An hour into the flight, the woman who introduced herself loudly to the flight attendant as Veronica Davenport had already complained about the snack options, the cabin temperature, and the lack of Wi-Fi. Marcus put on his noise-canceling headphones, hoping to drown out her voice. But the reprieve didn't last long. When the flight attendant returned with drink orders, Veronica's gaze fixed on Marcus' tablet. He had opened it to review his notes on neural networks. "What are you doing?" she asked sharply. Marcus removed his headphones, startled. "Excuse me?" "I asked what you're doing," Veronica repeated, her tone accusatory. "You've been typing non-stop since we took off. What are you working on?" Marcus blinked. Just some work. Is there a problem? How do I know you're not doing something suspicious? She said, narrowing her eyes. The flight attendant, standing nearby, looked alarmed. Ma'am, is everything all right? Veronica gestured dramatically at Marcus. This man has been acting suspiciously since we boarded. I want someone to check what he's doing. Marcus's heart pounded. He forced himself to stay calm. I'm a neuroscientist preparing a presentation, he said evenly. If you'd like, I can show you my slides. Veronica scoffed. A likely story. People like you always have an excuse. The flight attendant's cheeks flushed. Ma'am, please lower your voice. There's no reason to. I want the pilot to know about this, Veronica interrupted. For all we know, he could be. She didn't finish her sentence, but the implication hung in the air like a dark cloud. Passengers began to murmur. Marcus felt the weight of their stares. Within minutes, 2 flight attendants approached Marcus's row. Sir, would you mind stepping to the back of the plane for a moment? One asked. Marcus's mouth went dry. Why? Just a precaution, she said, avoiding his gaze. Marcus stood reluctantly, feeling every pair of eyes on him. As he walked toward the back, Veronica's voice followed him. I told you, people like him are always up to something. At the rear of the plane, the attendants questioned Marcus. He explained his work, showed his boarding pass, and even offered to share the contents of his tablet. Though they nodded politely, he could see the doubt in their eyes. After a few tense minutes, they allowed him to return to his seat. Veronica smirked as he passed. Figures. They let anyone on planes these days. The tension in the cabin was unbearable. Marcus remained silent, determined not to give Veronica the reaction she wanted. But as the flight neared its destination, she escalated further. I'm reporting this to security when we land, she declared loudly. Someone has to take a stand. Finally, a voice from across the aisle cut through the noise. Enough! It was a middle-aged man in a business suit. You're embarrassing yourself, he said, glaring at Veronica. This man hasn't done anything wrong. Several passengers murmured in agreement. Veronica's face turned crimson, but she doubled down. You'll all regret ignoring me, she snapped. People like him are dangerous. When the plane landed, 2 security officers met the passengers at the gate. Veronica immediately pointed at Marcus. That's him, she cried. Search his bags. The officers approached Marcus, who calmly pulled out his ID in a folder. I'm Dr. Marcus Jameson, he said, handing them a business card and conference materials. I'm delivering a keynote speech tomorrow on AI and neuroscience. The officers examined the documents and exchanged uneasy glances. This checks out, one said quietly. Veronica's jaw dropped. What? That can't be right. Marcus turned to her, his voice steady but firm. You assumed I was a threat because of the color of my skin. You humiliated me, disrupted this flight, and now everyone sees you for what you are. Passengers who had remained silent now whispered among themselves, casting judgmental glances at Veronica. The business-suited man from earlier stepped forward, addressing the officers. This man was harassed for no reason. If anyone should be questioned, it's her. The officers nodded, turning to Veronica. Ma'am, we need to speak with you, one said firmly. Veronica protested, but her voice was drowned out by the murmur of disapproval around her. Marcus walked away from the scene, his head held high. The ordeal had been exhausting, but he had faced it with dignity. As he exited the terminal, a young woman from the flight approached him. I'm sorry for what you went through, she said softly. You didn't deserve that. Marcus smiled faintly. Thank you, but it's not about what I deserve. It's about what we all need to do better. He left the airport, ready to deliver his keynote speech the next day. A talk about the power of technology to bridge divides and create a fairer world. As he hailed a cab, he reflected on the flight. It was a painful reminder of the challenges that still existed, but it also reinforced his resolve to be a force for change. Because in the face of ignorance and hate, the truth would always prevail. As Marcus rode to his hotel, he received an unexpected call from a journalist who had been tipped off about the incident. The journalist asked if Marcus would be willing to speak about his experience for an article on racial profiling in public spaces. Marcus hesitated. He preferred to let his work speak for itself, but this incident was bigger than him. It was an opportunity to highlight systemic issues that still plague society. "I'll do it," Marcus said firmly. "But this story isn't about me. It's about accountability and change." The next morning, the article went live, sparking widespread outrage. Social media erupted with support for Marcus, as well as calls for airlines to implement stronger anti-discrimination policies. The airline quickly issued an apology, but Marcus knew that words were not enough. He used his keynote platform to challenge corporate leaders to address biases within their organizations, urging them to take actionable steps toward inclusivity. In the days that followed, Marcus received hundreds of messages from people sharing similar stories. Though the ordeal had been draining, it reminded him of the power of resilience and the importance of using his voice to advocate for others. Marcus's journey had begun with a routine flight, but it ended with a profound sense of purpose that would drive him forward in his mission to create a more just world.